Hello, Miss Guerrier.
Good evening. How are you?
I am well. Thanks for asking. It's not always that people ask you how you're doing when you ask them how they're doing.
I'm always curious to how everyone is doing. So thank
So thanks for asking and thanks for being here.
my
And
pleasure.
yes, anyone who knows me or knows my work knows that I like to explore and create awareness about the important matters of our time. Therefore, I like to really try to engage the best minds among us in dialogues that not only challenge us, but also offer us the opportunity for some introspective look at ourselves and the world that we live in. So it is always my pleasure to have someone to talk to who has done all of the work, the kinds of work that you have done, Gary. So it is really, really my pleasure to welcome you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Right. And just for everyone who is watching us live on Facebook, I would like to say that anyone who has questions that they may like to ask Ms. Guerrier while we're talking would also be free to send us a message on Facebook, and I'll be checking and I'll make sure that she gets to answer those questions. So, do you mind if I call you Felicia?
Please do. Please
All
do.
right. And so please feel free, you can call me your own. And so please feel free to do that. So Felicia is a clinically trained social worker, trained in traumatic brain injury as a nurse. It was a traumatic brain injury nurse. And also, I use the word was because, but I don't think that you ever stop being a nurse, really.
Absolutely.
Right. So, you're a traumatic brain injury nurse and a social worker, and an educator and former combat medic. I will be asking questions about that. And, Felicia has a very diverse background. She collaborated with organizations like Partnership with Children and Epiphany Blue and Sea Change Collective, facilitating and advocating for mental health and social justice. Felicia also lends her expertise as a consultant with the New York City Police Foundation, serving as curriculum support for their Youth Options program, specializing in emotional intelligence. Felicia is a partner at Caricop Wellness Alliance, contributing to international social work practice, where she's a lead coach, a mentor, and strategist helping to bridge the West Indian wellness gap. She's also the founder of Alabasta Consulting, focusing on mental health, corporate wellness, and professional development. Felicia is also the host of the podcast Heart Conversations that I listen to, and she authored Naked and Unashamed, which is a book of poetry. Actually, that book is in two volumes. And also the author of I Am Present, which is a book and the companion book, which is a workbook, a journal, has really just been recently published. And, Felicia is a graduate of Adelphi University, where she got her undergraduate degree. I went to Adelphi too.
Absolutely.
And she got her graduate degree from Columbia University in New York City. So, Felicia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate it.
very busy, aren't you?
Actually, I've slowed down. Consulting life is a little easier in the sense of being constantly busy mobile. So I guess I'm busy seated now.
First of all, let's start by talking about your most recent work. I don't know which to call it the most recent. You might say, if I gave you the liberty to talk about your most recent work, we'll start by talking about the book, the journal that just came out. But where I want to start is your work at Caricop Wellness. And I like to hear about what you do there, that the Wellness Alliance, and also about Alabasta Consulting. You may want to combine both.
Absolutely. So I am like extremely honored because when I was working in Brownsville, we had this firecracker, amazing intern who was working with us, and she's from Grenada. And she was so amazing that we knew she would be such an amazing social worker that we continued to be friends, and I continued to mentor her. And she actually started in 2020 Carrie Cope Wellness Alliance, and I was super excited and very proud of the thought behind it. And her thought behind it was that the islands are very small, and if you try to do any type of mental health counseling, here we have HIPAA laws and different things like that. So to make it more accessible and to give reassurance of privacy, as opposed to the cultures of the island where it's all family and everyone shares and all of those things, she decided to do like a cross-cultural, cross-island therapy response. So she would have therapists and counselors from, let's say, Jamaica, and they would be mixed matched with someone from another island. Excuse me. And I just thought that was extremely brilliant. And I was super honored that she brought me on board with her. And we've done a bunch of facilitations, and we've even traveled together over to um, over to Grenada, where we did some fundraising and bringing in some mental health supports and school supplies. It's been amazing. She does such great, great work. She has interns in the country in the School of Mental Health there. And she's really, really bridging the gap, like she says, of West Indian wellness. So it's amazing. I'm so happy that we've remained friends.
Is that where your interest in international social work came from?
Well, my husband is Haitian, so because of that, I've always been very interested in international social work and always trying to kind of partner with any organization or anyone who is trying to bring about that awareness that's needed everywhere. So working with her just kind of sparked so much interest that it can, expand. So I am open to all the listeners who may be open to that. I am open to assisting and working on projects internationally. Yeah.
Right. And it's one of the reasons why I like social work, the fact that it's very vast. And if you practice it with the right mind, it also gives you an opportunity to see a world that is open to you. Because there is so much in our world to do. And the reality too is that there is such a thing as a human cost, as far as I'm concerned, which means that we are more similar than we're different. Therefore, the challenges that we experience in one part of the world also exist in another. And for anybody who is serious about social work practice, there's always a place, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And also working in New York City, she and I would talk about how when you have young people entering the school system and they're coming from another country, the barriers and the issues that they have. So we really bonded around those conversations and trying to bring curriculum and starting little groups to like help with those issues that are not often thought about in education.
Right. And so let's talk about the fact that your husband is from Haiti, which of course exposes you to uh, that work. And then
Absolutely.
doing that work also in other parts of the world. What would you say? I mean, if I asked you, for example, when you go from one part to another and you do the kind of work that you've done in these places, what would you say you have seen to be different, and what would you say has been similar in all of that?
The first thing that's really similar is the stigma behind mental health. And the one thing that I saw that would be really different is having some form of infrastructure around it, having the schools of social work, having mental health resources and clinics. So those are far in between. So here, in the United States, especially during the pandemic, it's become really urgent. So it's something that I was hoping would happen. I was saying, okay, this pandemic is horrible, but hopefully on the other side of it, we'll understand how important mental health resources and practitioners are to our health. It's holistic. So very happy that we're understanding that. So those were the two things when we were in Grenada. We had a excellent opportunity to speak to different people in government areas of health, the Prime Minister of Health, around what would it look like to have those infrastructures in place, and what would it look like to utilize some of the students in even, to utilize them in more places than just like a hospital setting. So yeah, it's really a place of creation right now. It's a new place where social workers need to be in every every room, in every situation, in every institution. So we're trying to bridge that gap, not just
Right.
overseas, but here as well.
I will ask you more questions about that, but you may have to promise later on to be back, because you have just opened a a really broad conversation on stigma and mental health and the need for mental health practitioners to be involved in our society, the way that in ways that we really don't discuss much.
Mhm.
And but for now, I'm sure that you know someone called Barbara Callis who is saying hello to you on Facebook. Right. But let me, you were in the military. You didn't just grow up and decided you were going to be a social worker. First,
Absolutely.
yeah, you went to the military. I want to hear first about your military experience. And first of all, thank you for your service.
Thank
I'd like to hear about that experience. And then also, I want to hear as you talk about that, or maybe in the end, or wherever you want to locate that part of the conversation, how the military prepared you not just for life, but also for the profession that we both practice.
you. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was speaking with you a little early offline, and I said, the older I get, the more I appreciate and understand how my military career formed so much of who I am, and also formed a lot of my career choices. Excuse me. So, as a young woman in New York City, growing up in South Queens, I did not have a resource to go to college. So I decided I was going to join the military so that I would be able to go to school. And my basic training was in Fort Sam Houston. No, no, that wasn't basic training. Basic training was in South Carolina at Fort Jackson in the summertime. So if you can imagine being in South Carolina in the summertime during basic training, I'm already a good soldier. So it was extremely hot, and there was a plan. My plan was, I'm going to join the military, get fit, I'll get disciplined, and I'll go to school, and we'll go from there. But one thing that I like to speak about often and I share is that at Fort Jackson they had a victory tower, and when you're coming into the base and you're on the bus, you pass it and it looks very intimidating. It looks extremely scary. Um, and immediately the drill sergeants are telling you, this is Victory Tower, and this is what, and when you're looking like there's no way, because I don't even know how tall it is, how many feet it is, but it's like in the air, and there's only one way up and one way down. So in basic training, you train in many areas. So by the time you get to Victory Tower, you have been trained for it. This is the time for you to put all of your training into action. This is the time for you to get it all together mentally and physically, and for you to go ahead and get it done. So that has been huge for me in my life to realize that if I can prepare myself, first do the preparation, first get it, get what I need to get, train the way I need to train, and then I can kind of get to that place and conquer something that looks extremely looming and intrusive and just scary. So I constantly think of Victory Tower when I am facing something that's just hard and new and something that I've never done. So Victory Tower, you're facing heights, the fear of heights, rappelling off of a wall. Like it's really mental and physical. And that's really what life is. Life is very mental and very physical. So yeah.
There was something that you said a short while ago when you started talking about your military experience, and we talked about being a New Yorker. Felicia Callis actually wrote, "Thank you." you know, So the point of that is that what you're saying is resonating with a lot of people. But in listening to your most recent podcast, I was actually taken by your description of the victory tower that you just spoke about. But
Mm-hmm.
in addition to that, you were talking about fear and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was something that you said there that I thought were really the highlights of that podcast. I think for me, there was something that you said that I thought was really the highlight too. Of course, the two topics, fear and discipline, really were prominent as you talked about your life and how you made the choices that you made and how you made some of those choices even while you were afraid. And
Absolutely.
then you said you gave this, it wasn't really a dichotomy, but it was a see fear and faith
Mm-hmm.
can coexist. And you said sometimes we need to jump and then let faith take over. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we need to have faith
Mm-hmm.
before we jump. Can you expand on that, please?
Oh, absolutely. I remember saying in that podcast that I have lived both. So I have been the woman who has no idea how this is going to work. I have no idea. And it's very frightening when you don't know. The unknown are things that can often lead to fear. But what I would know in the moment is that I can't stay here. So I can't stay in this spot. So even though moving forward there's a lot of fear, like joining the military, that is like you're crazy. Everyone was like, "Don't do that. That's crazy. You will now belong to a government." But I pushed through the fear because I had a plan for something on the other side. So even though everything was like maybe not, I believed that on the other side my future self would appreciate the choice, that my future self would have more opportunities. So the point is to not allow fear to paralyze. And sometimes you just jump afraid because at least you put the action to it. And oftentimes, if you put action to it, the actual act is the faith without you knowing it. So that's kind of where I've been.
That is profound. So if you jump
Mm-hmm,
and then that act
mm-hmm,
then is really a manifestation of the faith.
absolutely.
Where does discipline come in?
The discipline comes in because when we say the word discipline, discipline is, discipline gets a bad rap, but discipline is the training. Discipline is when you are mentally trying to actually break a cycle, right? So it takes, I don't remember, you tell me, my good doctor, it takes a certain amount of days to create a habit and a certain amount of time to break a habit. So that's where your discipline comes in. If you are now trying to do something, I always say start small. So one thing that I had to do when I came out the military was stop eating everything that was white. So I had to just take away the white bread, take away the white sugar, and I would just replace it with something else. So if you can take away some things in your discipline walk and add something else, you won't have to fill the void that makes it feel so jarring and makes it feel so complicated. So part of that is kind of understanding what you need, um, and what just understanding what you need. One thing about me, I'm a huge self care advocate, huge love coach, all about finding out who you are. So that's because in life, the only person we can change and that we're responsible for is ourselves. So how we navigate the world is really how we see it. So it's really important to nourish that part of ourselves. So that's why a lot of these things, like I said, jumping, the action of jumping is the faith. And that's also with yourself, the action of asking yourself these questions and the action of, I want to train and change this cycle. It's all internal. So every time you do the action, you're doing major work.
Yeah, and I think it's important. One of the things you said earlier that I think it's important for everyone to know that even though your job as a clinical social worker is to bring healing to people and to rebuild and build, there are also some personal challenges for which you have to remind yourself of these same things that you teach and that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vicarious trauma is real, you
It is
know,
real.
it's real. And I had a professor who would say vicarious trauma is very real, but also, um, what was the word she used? She said it's also very real to be victorious in it. So she's like, there's both ends. So you can also, catch the feelings and catch what's bad about it, but you also can catch as you watch the glimmers and as you watch them grow. And your job is to believe that they will, so that it won't always feel heavy. But absolutely, we have to take care of ourselves. And a lot of my work is actually with other therapists to remind them to take care of themselves while they're taking care of others. Is just important. It's really important. None of it is selfish. I call it radical love, radical self love, because there's often guilt behind things like that. And even from my military mind taught me a lot of great things, but it also taught me mission first over me, mission first over the sacrifice of me, and that I would be the sacrifice. So I had to really unlearn that as well and unravel that as well,
Why did you have to do that?
so that I can have self-preservation. I cannot pour into anyone else if I don't have a full cup for myself. I need to have the overflow for everyone else. So absolutely, absolutely. You
You
know,
know,
the
if I had a guilty conscience, I would think that the way you looked at me just now just was saying this message is really for you. You have to take care of yourself because, I am really not great at that. So I take this as a reminder.
absolutely. And with my nursing lens, it's a constant, So I remember when they changed the DSM-5 and you had to, combine the medical with the mental. And for me, I was like, absolutely, because a lot of times we can feel very depressed and we can feel a lot of mood changes and even feel a little psychotic based on hormonal imbalances, based on mineral deficiencies. So I go into all of that with, the wonderful people that I work with. So it's really, really true that I would say, okay, what vitamin are you taking? Your vitamins? It's wintertime, so you're not getting enough vitamin D. Vitamin D and B complex is vital for your nervous system. And as social workers, we're constantly, trying to teach how to regulate that. But it's actually physiologically also. So we have to put in the actual nutrients in the body to help regulate that as well.
Thank you. And that brings me to I Am Present. That's your book. First of all, why did you write that and why did you choose that title? But as you respond to that question, I also like to hear why you chose the title for the first two volumes of your book, written in, I think, 2006. And yeah, you were busy that year. One was published in March and the other one was published in June of that year, 2006, I believe it was. It was called, Naked and Unashamed, right?
Mm.
So
Oof.
how did you choose these titles? I mean, Naked and Unashamed, and now I Am Present.
Really interesting. Such a good question. The story is wild. So, um, Naked and Unashamed, I was in my 20s and I am a Desert Storm
Hmm.
veteran. So in my mid 20s, I started experiencing a lot of physical illnesses and ailments. I started really feeling depressed around it. So that poetry that I was writing was literally therapy for me. It was me journaling without really knowing it, but I've always used poetry as a way of self-expression from a child. So I kind of poured my heart out in those books about how I was feeling and about disappointment and all of the things that happens to a young woman and the things that were specifically happening to me. But I was also seeking God in that time, and I wanted to be really vulnerable before our God, and that's where the title came from because I absolutely believe in the physical aspects as a nurse. I actually believe in the mental parts of everything, but I absolutely believe in the spiritual connecting force that basically to me balances the other two out.
Well, thank you very much for that. And one of the things that I'd like to ask you, we can talk about that now before we talk about your most recent publication, I Am Present. Yeah, let's do that. You are a nurse,
Mm-hmm.
you are a clinical social worker, and you're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Your faith really guides you in a lot of the things that you do and you're also a military veteran.
Yes.
I want to say, what are you not? But what I should say instead is, you can answer that, what are you not? But what I really like to ask is, how do all of this combine to shape and guide you as a professional woman?
Mm-hmm. The lens that I use, um, I appreciate it so much. I appreciate all of the trials and confusions and setbacks and disappointments. I appreciate them all so much now because when I am speaking to someone, I can relate, I can empathize, I can understand, and I also can sit in front of them as proof that it won't always be like that. So I utilize my nursing lens often, like I explained to you, around when people are having issues with depression, with asking certain questions just physiologically, also with children around, well, what are they eating? And I use my military lens often in an interesting way. I remember when I first started working in Brooklyn with the students, I was really shocked that I felt like I was seeing a lot of post traumatic stress disorder that we would see in veterans, that it felt like I was seeing in a community. And I fought hard and long around overdiagnosing of things like ADHD and defiant disorders as opposed to PTSD. Um, so my military lens, literally being a veteran and literally having that diagnosis of PTSD and working with my therapist and understanding it, it made it really easy to see it in someone else. And so that's where that lens comes in. And then my my writing, like I said, has always been therapeutic for me. So yeah, it's like a good old potpourri that I absolutely utilize all of them to be the complete professional woman that I am whenever I facilitate, do a keynote speaking or anything, I bring my full self into the room. I bring my full self. All of those areas and all of those versions of me, brought me
Right.
to where I am. Absolutely.
Right. You wrote the book first, the I Am Present, and then you recently published the workbook or the journal to accompany.
Mhm.
Why did you write that, and why did you name it I Am Present?
Mhm.
And what was the process of writing it like for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Good question. Good question. So that ebook is a really quick read because I wanted it to be something that almost like a first aid book, like when you're in the middle of a crisis or needing to get still, that's something that you could pick up and read through it. So the backstory is that I was turning 50 in 2020, and while I was literally kind of blogging my year from 49 up to 50 and all of the interesting things that were happening. Oh, thank you. And all of the interesting things that were happening to me mentally, spiritually, even in my body. And I also realized that I had a lot of I guess like preconceived notions around turning 50 and what it meant for some of the women in my family. So it was just a lot of thoughts around it. So in prayer, it felt like I was like, Lord, I kind of feel like I'm all over the place. And it's like the Holy Spirit was just kind of bringing me to silence, to silence it all and to like be present in the moment. And I'm like, how do I do that? So it was really a book to me for me to learn how to kind of silence it and enjoy where I am, to be present in the moment, to experience life really fully. And I felt like it was such a great time because I was learning a lot of um, different breathing modalities that actually helped during the pandemic. It helped for me to have learned how to kind of turn inwards and how to breathe. So that is a reminder for my 50th birthday of how important it is for Felicia to remember to be present in daily life. And that's the story. 50 is interesting for women.
Oh, it is. What about 60?
More
So,
blessings, more blessings.
it actually speaks also to how we evolve as human beings, but also how our world evolves. Because when I was growing up, it was always the thought that women didn't like to even speak their age beyond 21. So, but now it's like, you can actually be 50 and wear it.
That's
You know,
right. That's right. Absolutely. It's a whole honor.
maybe that is why Lakeisha Wright is actually waving at you and saying, say that's on Facebook, waving at you. And because I
Absolutely.
think that even that, I think you would agree with me that it speaks to the evolution that we have, all the transformations that we're going through as individuals and as people, as a world, indeed. But I First of all, so you had that, you wrote that, and then you wrote the accompanying book that's out this month, actually. So just tell me I'm the first to interview you on that.
You are. You are. Thank you,
So
Dr.
that is fascinating. And, I was going to ask how people can get the book, but I have just posted that, and you can go ahead and say,
On Amazon. You can go to Amazon, I Am Present Journal, or you can look up my name, Felicia Callis Guerrier, and there it will be. It's also on my website, lovecoachfg.com. But the website is going to send you to Amazon, and go ahead and support because it's oftentimes when you are very busy and your brain is very full, it's good to have a journal that prompts you. You know, sometimes you just open a book and you can just write out your heart. And sometimes, I know for me, and I love to write, there's times that I can't write. There's too much going on and I can't write. So prompts help so much, you know. So I decided, I said, okay, let me do that. But who really inspired that was my daughter Tia. She's in publishing. She works for, I believe, is Random House Publishing in New York City. And she said, Ma, you really need to add a journal to this. It's a lot of things. She made me start the podcast again because I had started the podcast in 2019. She's like, you need to start the podcast again. You need to add a journal. She actually said a workbook. So I did the journal and she said that's not a workbook. But she's the one who really inspired me to add that piece to it. Yeah, so having the prompts, it is really good for you to get out of your head some things and put it on the paper. Because living in our heads for too long is not always a good idea.
Right. I must say that I personally enjoy listening to your podcast.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
heard conversations, and I really think everyone should listen to it. And I just want to end on this note that one of the things that we have established and talked about is the role of um, spirituality and your relationship with God,
Yes.
and being a military person and being a nurse and being a social worker, all of those combined to make you the person that you are.
Mhm.
Another thing is you also talked about your daughter and what a relationship has been like in helping you to get back to podcasting and get back to where you're at. One of
Mhm.
the things that I don't want to leave on the table, I know that we should be saying good night very shortly, but something I don't want to leave on the table is something that you mentioned earlier, that is the impact of stigma on mental health care. One of the things that I do when I teach the diagnosis class at a graduate level is to actually devote a whole class to talking about stigma
Nice.
because of what that does. Whether it's the stigma that we experience from other people that then leads to the self-stigma that then impacts not only diagnosis, but our willingness to receive treatment.
Mhm.
I want you to speak to that in particular because we actually are in a world right now where there are so many things happening that we can hardly keep up with.
Mhm.
Yet, there tends to be some reluctance in some quarters among some groups or
Absolutely.
individuals to actually step up and receive the mental health care they need.
Absolutely.
So I want you to speak to that and then give us some advice on how stigma can be attacked and give us that advice as if you're speaking to people who are just family members and regular people and also professionals. And having been in the military yourself and the fact that you work very closely with the New York City Police Foundation,
Mhm.
these are areas where, people might not really want to step up. So I'd like you to speak to all of these groups. In other words, speak to all of us.
Absolutely. So usually I, like to speak just kind of around the science and let people know that there's no fault here, there's no blame. So in epigenetics, we study how historical trauma can pass through 300 generations and live in our DNA. So a lot of times we are holding not just what our life experiences is, but we're holding the life experiences of our ancestors. And when you think about that and you think of the weight of that, it absolutely has to affect you in your physical body and in your mind. So oftentimes I just kind of lead with that to let everyone know how human we are and how heavy it is. So for us who are in the diaspora, we definitely understand the tragedies that have preceded us with enslavement and being dispersed across the world, and to know that those things can still resonate in our DNA makes you realize that when you are living in a world now where you have financial burdens and just the day-to-day living, that just as you go to the doctor for a physical once a year, that you can also check in with your mental health the same. It is the same. It is the same body. It is the same being. So it's kind of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So did the depression come before you got diagnosed with diabetes? Like it's all the same. It's all the same. So even in educating our medical professionals around embracing that as well, for when someone comes in for a medical checkup, to have that conversation about how are you feeling. um, I think that that would be really really good in destigmatizing it culturally. Absolutely, in a lot of our cultures it's like, no, just pray, no, it's not this, it's not that. But on my medical, with my medical lens, I absolutely can tell you that you can have dysregulated levels that affect your body. If your serotonin is up, low, adrenaline's, all of these things are real. So I kind of just utilize all of the science behind it to help destigmatize it for people to understand it is not like, oh, uh, I don't want people to think I'm crazy, but it's a dis-ease. It is just a dis-ease as easy as cancer. If someone has cancer, we can be empathetic to that. But if someone has a mental health disorder, excuse me, we want to shy away from it. So as soon as we can understand that everything lies within us and it's not separate, the mind is not separate from the body. It is not separate. It is one. Then I think that the destigmatization could can cease a bit. And I try to do a really good job at being very open and honest and transparent about me and about my life, and utilizing my story about being a combat vet in Desert Storm, and literally being one of the babies there. We were on, me and one of the other soldiers were the youngest in Desert Storm, and we were on USA Today. So to know that your prefrontal brain is not even completely developed until 25, to know that I was in a war at 18, how that has affected me. So I also let people know that even though you're not overseas, sometimes your life can feel like a war. And how old were you experiencing these things? So just making the conversation very natural where they can see it without having blame. I feel like oftentimes the stigma is around them feeling like I did something wrong to my child, or I'm something's broken with me. And it's not, anything that's broken with you. It's kind of like, well, what happened? Like, what has happened? And just keeping it open that way. And those are ways that I try to make mental health more accessible and not as stigmatized, just a natural conversation.
Right. I cannot thank you enough for coming to see me today, for, for spending this time with me and not just with me, but with so many other people who are watching and are going to be also seeing this. Or just on two final notes. One, someone who I recognize as a social worker in Texas has just said that was great insight, and thank you for the way that you described the trauma responses and how we need to take care of ourselves. And I also just personally want to thank you because I know that you're very busy, and yet my scheduler told me how seamless it was to really work with you to schedule this. And I thank you very much for all of your responses and for being here today. It is not the last time that we're going to be talking.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so happy you listened to my podcast. Everybody listen, Hard Conversations.
Right. So thank you very much and stay well.
Thank you, Dr. Eseleh.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Good night.